Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dim quiet of a Bronze Age village, where the morning starts before the sun even decides to climb over the horizon. You're there, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, barefoot on a packed dirt floor, the air still heavy with the smell of smoke from yesterday's fire. It's not glamorous, no espresso machines, no buttered toast, but it's life. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this routine very long. The food's coarse, the hours are brutal, and if the smoke in the hut doesn't choke you, the grindstone will. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're retuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise before the first rooster bothers to crow, because in this village, the day waits for no one. The hearth is the heart of the home, and the fire that went low overnight needs coaxing back to life. You kneel down, carefully nursing embers with dried grass and bits of twig, and for a moment it feels like a ritual, almost holy. No fire, no cooking, no eating. And no eating means you're doomed before the day even begins. The hut smells of last night's stew, thick, earthy, maybe with lentils, maybe with a scrap of salted goat meat tanned, that smoky tang that never really leaves your clothes. The walls are darkened with soot, and the roof is low enough you sometimes knock your head if you stand too quickly. Imagine that. Breakfast prep with a headache before you've even had your first bite. Around you, the family stirs. The youngest whines, softly, clutching a bit of straw doll, while the older ones shuffle toward the door to fetch water. Someone has to walk to the stream, clay jars in hand, and it's never as fun as TikTok makes fetching water look. If the stream is low, you'll have to dig a little, scooping out clearer water from beneath the muddy surface. Historians still argue whether this duty rotated evenly, or whether the younger children got stuck with it forever. You can guess which way kids would vote. The hearth crackles again, and soon there's that first comforting plume of warmth spreading through the room. This is where the rhythm of meals begins, not with food, but with fire, hands, and patience. Every household member has a role. One tends flames, another measures grain, another maybe scours yesterday's pots with sand and water. Yes, sand. Think of it as the Bronze Age version of dish soap, though admittedly with far less lemon scent. Outside, the light creeps in. You hear distant sounds, a cow lowing, a neighbor coughing, the clink of metal tools being readied for the day. Life hums around you. But inside the hut, the first priority remains getting that morning porridge going. Yet it's not as simple as opening a pantry. Grain is stored in big clay jars or pits, sealed with straw and mud, and you hope no mice found their way in during the night. You scoop a portion out, and yes, sometimes there's a little surprise wriggling in the grains. Extra protein if you want to be optimistic. The reality check. You're probably picking bugs out of your food before breakfast has even started. The grain has to be cleaned, winnowed, and sorted by hand. It's a slow, repetitive rhythm, flicking husks away with your fingers, blowing gently to separate what's edible from what's not. It's meditative, in the way filing taxes might be meditative if you had to do it with a sharp rock. The village isn't silent, though. As smoke rises from each hearth, it curls into the dawn sky, signaling that life is awake and meals are underway. You might even hear a neighbor call across huts, swapping jokes or asking to borrow a pinch of salt. Salt's precious, of course, but neighbors can be persuasive, especially when everyone knows they have to lean on each other during lean times. And all of this happens before you've even had a bite to eat. The Bronze Age doesn't hand you a granola bar on the way out the door. It makes you earn that first warm spoonful of gruel by dragging yourself through chores, half asleep. Still, there's something cozy about it. The crackle of fire, the smell of damp earth warming, the soft sound of grain pouring into a bowl. For a brief moment, you almost forget how badly your back hurts from sleeping on a straw mat. And so the day begins, not with a feast, not with speed, but with steady, smoky, ash-dusted care. You've got your fire going, but the hearth isn't worth much without something to cook. That's where the grain comes in, the backbone of your diet, the thing that keeps the village running, and the reason your teeth will probably wear down to nubs by the time you're 30. You head toward the corner where a sack of barley rests, heavy and scratchy, or maybe you lift the lid off a clay bin holding emo wheat. Grain isn't glamorous, but it's life. Think of it as the Bronze Age version of ramen noodles. Cheap, filling, and endlessly repeatable. The cleaning starts first. Those little husks cling stubbornly, and no matter how many times you blow or shake, some always sneak into the mix. When you chew later, there'll be that crunch, the one you know isn't supposed to be there. And yes, it will get stuck in your molars. Archaeologists actually find Bronze Age skulls with teeth ground down from years of eating this gritty stuff. It's the kind of detail that makes you grateful for modern dentists. Once the grain is sorted, you bring out the grindstone, a quern as historians call it, though you'll probably just mutter something less polite under your breath while you work. Imagine two stones, one flat and heavy, the other hand-sized, curved just enough to fit your palms. You pour a little pile of grain onto the lower stone and begin rubbing, pressing, rolling the top stone back and forth. The sound is rhythmic. Scrape, crunch, scrape. It's strangely hypnotic, like an ancient ASMR video, only your arms are on fire from the effort. Historians still argue whether women did most of this grinding, or whether it rotated among all family members. What we do know is that somebody had to do it daily, and it could take hours. By the time you've got enough flour for porridge or bread, your shoulders are sore and you re-wondering if anyone in history ever invented a Bronze Age gym just to make this process slightly less depressing. And the flour you get isn't silky white either. It's coarse, flecked with bits of bran, maybe even tiny fragments of stone that chipped off the quern. You're eating minerals whether you want them or not. On the plus side, congratulations, you'll never be low on dietary fiber. Sometimes, if the household was lucky, the grain wasn't just barley or wheat. Millet might appear, tiny golden seeds that cook quicker and feel almost luxurious in comparison. Or oats, though those weren't always as common. There's even evidence of spelt making its way into Bronze Age diets. Basically, you're working with whatever grows in your soil and survives storage through winter. If a rat or a damp patch gets to it first, well, tough luck. The grind itself isn't just about food, it's about community. You might do it alone, but often it's done with chatter in the background. Someone tending animals, kids playing in the dirt, neighbors calling to each other. The grindstone is the heartbeat of daily prep, its rasp echoing through the huts like a background soundtrack everyone shares. And here's a quirky tidbit. Archaeologists sometimes find querns buried in graves. As if the afterlife also demanded you keep grinding grain. Imagine working all your life, only to be buried with your eternal homework. Thanks, ancestors. The smell of raw flour dust fills the hut. It clings to your hands, your clothes, and your nose. You sneeze, probably more than once, and your sibling laughs. Because even in 1500 BCE, siblings are experts at mocking you. By now, you've got a decent pile of coarse flour, and maybe you mix it with a little water, forming a dough to bake later. Or, more urgently, you'll use it as the base for breakfast porridge. Either way, this grinding task defines the rhythm of your mornings. Without it, no meal happens. Without meals, no strength for the fields. And without fields, well, the whole village collapses faster than your patience when the quern jams. So you keep grinding, shoulders aching, the scrape of stone against stone carrying on like a mantra, and in the back of your mind you wonder, was this all there was? Some historians suggest the monotony of food prep shaped the very pace of Bronze Age life, anchoring people to cycles of labor that felt unending. Others argue there were moments of joy in the repetition, like when you shared jokes across the hearth, or when a neighbor wandered over with a jug of fresh ale to ease the monotony. The truth, spent the better part of an hour grinding grain, your arms buzzing with that dull ache, and now it's time for the first real comfort of the day, porridge or gruel. Honestly, both words are accurate, though porridge sounds cozy while gruel sounds like a punishment in a Dickens novel. Either way, this is breakfast in the Bronze Age, warm, filling, and repetitive enough to make you daydream about bacon and eggs that won't exist for another few thousand years. The flour you worked for is dumped into a clay pot, mixed with water from the jar fetched earlier, and stirred into a thick slurry. The hearth flames lick the sides of the pot, smoke curling into your face as you squat beside it, stirring slowly with a wooden spoon. There's no timer here, no little digital beep, just your instincts and maybe the way the steam smells when it's almost ready. Too thick, and it scorches to the bottom of the pot. Too thin, and it slides down like tasteless soup. The balance is somewhere in the middle, though truthfully, taste is not today's luxury. Still, sometimes you get lucky. Maybe someone tosses in a handful of crushed herbs, wild garlic if it's spring, fennel seeds if you've managed to dry some. Maybe there's a spoonful of honey, precious and rare, making the porridge suddenly feel like dessert. Most days, though, it's just water, flour, and a prayer. You don't burn it. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age households flavored their morning meals often, or whether flavor was saved for feasts. Judging by the complaints in your stomach, you're rooting for the flavor everyday theory. The family gathers, bowls in hand. These aren't fancy ceramic dishes, they're rough clay, sometimes chipped at the rim, heavy in your palms. You ladle steaming porridge into each one, and the hut fills with the earthy smell of cooked grain. A toddler reaches too quickly, sticking fingers into the hot mass and yelping. You laugh a little, but mostly you're just relieved you don't have to eat the scorched edge yourself. Everyone sits close. Meals aren't silent, but they're not filled with endless chatter either. There's chewing, the occasional grunt of satisfaction, the scrape of spoons against bowls, and of course, the occasional cough, because porridge that thick doesn't always go down smoothly. It's hearty, it sticks to your ribs, but it's not winning any Michelin stars. There's a ritual to it though. This isn't just food, it's the first communal act of the day. Eating together sets the tone. Kids learn patience by waiting their turn. Adults sneak glances at who's eating too quickly or too slowly, and somewhere in there you catch your mind wandering. The fire crackles, someone sighs, the porridge cools, and the morning drifts into routine. Every once in a while the porridge includes more exciting ingredients. Foragers might return with berries, staining the pale mush with a burst of color. If you're really lucky, there could be nuts crushed in, giving a crunch that doesn't come from stray husks. And if you're unlucky, well, sometimes a bug slips in. Extra flavor, extra protein, nature's surprise. You grimace, but you keep eating because wasting food isn't an option. Quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists believe Bronze Age people occasionally mixed porridge with ale or weak beer instead of water, especially when water supplies were questionable. Imagine that starting your morning with beer-flavored oatmeal. It sounds strange, but it's not too different from putting whiskey in your coffee, if you think about it. Functional, questionable, and oddly comforting. The porridge doesn't just feed you, it fuels the day. Fields need tending, animals need checking, and you need calories to push through. Without this first meal, you'd be stumbling long before midday. But as you scrape the last clumps from your bowl, you also feel the monotony setting in. Day after day, the same dish, the same motions. You wonder if Bronze Age kids ever groaned, not porridge again, only to be met with a sharp look from their mother. And yet, despite its blandness, there's something satisfying here. The warmth spreading through your chest, the smoke curling lazily upward, the faint hum of voices blending with the clatter of spoons. For a brief moment, you feel the rhythm of this place. This time, it's not glamorous, but it's great. You set aside your empty bowl, still sticky with traces of porridge, and step out into the cool morning air. Your stomach's full enough for now, but the day's meals don't end with what came out of the grain jar. Out here, food depends just as much on the wild as it does on the fields. Foraging is the village's quiet backup plan, the safety net of daily life. Without it, your porridge would stay bland, your stew would taste like plain hot water, and your body would probably hate you for missing half its nutrients. So you trudge into the low grass and scattered trees with a basket over your arm, eyes scanning for anything edible. And here's where the Bronze Age is both generous and sneaky. There are greens, sprouting wild nettles, sorrel, chickweed, all things that can be tossed into a pot to make food less boring. But one wrong leaf, and congratulations. You've just seasoned your stew with something that doubles as medicine, or worse, a mild poison. Historians still argue whether villagers had deep botanical knowledge or just played it safe with a handful of familiar plants. Given that everyone here lived close to the land, odds are your grandmother could point out 10 edible weeds before you even spotted a rabbit. You pluck some wild garlic, its sharp scent filling your hands. Maybe you snag a few dandelion greens, too. These are humble, ordinary things. But in a stew later they'll transform a lump of beans into something vaguely exciting, and honestly you're grateful for that. Herbs aren't just flavor, they're medicine, too. A sprig of mint might ease a sour stomach. A handful of thyme can keep meat from rotting quite so quickly. You don't think of it as health food in the modern sense. You think of it as keeping your family alive just one more season. And because superstition slips into everything, someone might even tuck a sprig of mugwort behind the doorframe, convinced it wards off evil spirits. Who needs a fridge when you've got magical herbs, right? Of course, foraging isn't just about plants. If you've got a sharp eye, there are mushrooms growing under trees. Some are edible, some delicious, and some will kill you faster than you can say oops. Villagers tread carefully. A quirky tidbit here. There's evidence some Bronze Age communities deliberately avoided mushrooms altogether. Maybe out of caution, maybe out of superstition. So when you spot a fat inviting cap, you hesitate. Better to come home with empty hands than with a fatal experiment. Your basket fills slowly, a few greens, a handful of nuts cracked from last year's stores, maybe some berries if it's the right season. The land gives, but never too much. You don't expect a modern supermarket's abundance, you take what's there. Thankful it's not another bland day of grain alone. Back at the village, kids cluster around, pointing at the berries. You hand them a few, watching purple juice smear across little mouths, sticky fingers pressing against tunics. It's messy, but it's joy-proof that even in a life so bound to work, sweetness sneaks in. Sometimes, the foraging trip turns adventurous. You might stumble on a beehive tucked into a hollow tree. Tempting, isn't it? Honey is the treasure of the Bronze Age, rare and precious, but getting it means smoke, stings, and risk. Maybe today you're brave. Maybe today you come back with a golden prize, honeycomb glistening in the sun, and the entire family cheers at the thought of drizzling sweetness over porridge. Or maybe you get stung 20 times and vow never to mess with bees again. Either outcome feels very Bronze Age. And while you're busy filling baskets, you overhear villagers talking about which plants keep spirits happy or angry. One swears fennel seeds bring good fortune. Another mutters that carrying hazelnuts keeps you from getting lost. The practical and the mystical blend seamlessly. You don't question it, because out here, survival and belief often look the same. When you finally set your basket down inside the hut, the contents look humble. Greens, herbs, maybe a splash of sweetness. But you know what it means. Tonight's stew will taste a little brighter, a little fresher. And in a world where meals are repetitive, those small bursts of flavor carry more joy than you'd expect. Foraging is quiet, steady work. It doesn't make feasts. It doesn't fill bellies on its own, but it makes every other meal bearable, and sometimes even wonderful. The morning's chores aren't done yet. because you still hear the soft, impatient sound of animals outside the hut. Dairy animals, goats if you're humble, cows if you're lucky, and sheep if you want wool as well as milk are waiting to be milked. Their bleats and low rumbles make it clear. If you don't hurry, they'll kick up dust and maybe kick you too. You step into the yard, still cool with dew, and kneel beside a goat. The smell hits you first, sharp, musky, undeniably goat. You press your forehead lightly against her side, steadying yourself, and squeeze gently at the teats. Warm milk streams into a clay pot, frothing faintly, steaming in the morning chill. There's something soothing about the rhythm, though your hands cramp easily if you're not practiced. And of course, there's always the risk of a sudden hoof to the ribs. Bronze Age breakfast isn't just labor, it's combat training. Fresh milk is a luxury but also a gamble. Drink it straight from the animal and it's warm, rich and slightly grassy. But without refrigeration, it turns sour fast. That's why you rarely drink much raw. Instead, you turn it into something that lasts longer. Butter if you've got time to churn, or simple soft cheese if you want something that survives more than a day. Making cheese feels like quiet alchemy. You heat the milk gently in a pot over the hearth. Drop in something acidic vinegar, wild herbs, even the stomach lining of a calf if you've got rennet, and watch curds form. It's messy, smelly, and beautiful. You scoop out the solids with your hands, pressing them into rough lumps that harden into cheese. Not the glossy blocks you see in supermarkets, but small, irregular clumps that taste sharper and saltier with each passing day. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age cheese was a staple food or more of a treat. Some evidence suggests entire herds were managed specifically for milk, while other digs hint cheese was occasional, a seasonal bonus. Whatever the truth, you cradle your little lump of fresh curd with quiet pride. It means protein, fat, and variety in meals that might otherwise taste like wet cardboard. Butter is a treat, too. You might fill a skin bag with milk and rock it back and forth, patiently waiting for fat to separate. It's tedious, but imagine the reward: a smear of golden butter on warm flatbread. The richness melting on your tongue after a day of chewing gritty porridge, worth every arm ache. There's even yogurt-like stuff, if milk is left in a warm place long enough. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's an accident, and sometimes it's just sour milk you decide to eat anyway because, well, food is food. A quirky tidbit: archaeologists studying ancient residues have actually found traces of dairy fats in pottery shards, proving that Bronze Age folk weren't just drinking milk, they were experimenting, curdling, and preserving it. Children hover nearby, eager for a sip of fresh milk, giggling as foam clings to their lips. It's sweet, like a reward after the bland porridge. Adults take smaller sips, already thinking ahead. Some milk saved for cheese, some for tonight's stew, some maybe for trade with a neighbor. Every drop matters, and every animal is watched carefully, because one sick goat means less milk, less cheese, fewer meals, and a hungry winter. And it's not just practicality, there's a bit of belief mixed in too. Some villagers whisper that cows are sacred, tied to fertility or strength. Others mutter that spilling milk brings bad luck, a sign that spirits are displeased. So you handle the pot carefully, aware that in this world, dropping your breakfast isn't just clumsy, it's cosmic insult. By the time you carry the fresh milk inside, your arms smell like animals, your hands are sticky, and your stomach is already rumbling again. You set the pot near the hearth, imagining the little additions it will bring to meals. A dollop of curd and stew, a slice of cheese with bread, maybe even butter if you're lucky. It's not glamorous, but it's nourishment, and in the Bronze Age, that's as close to comfort food as you're going to get. You've got your grain ground, your porridge eaten, your herbs gathered, and your milk pail set aside. But there's one thing every villager secretly craves: bread. Not the fluffy golden loaves you picture cooling on a modern windowsill. Bronze Age bread is flatter, rougher, and tougher on your teeth, but oh, when it comes out of the oven, steaming and fragrant, it feels like a feast. The dough starts simple. You scoop a few handfuls of flour still coarse from your aching grindstone efforts and stir it with water in a clay bowl. Maybe you add a pinch of salt if you've got some, or a drizzle of honey if you're feeling fancy. The mixture becomes a sticky mess clinging to your fingers. Kneading is rough work, pushing and folding until the dough feels less like glue and more like something that might actually hold together. Now here's the fun part: yeast, or rather, the lack of neat little packets labeled instant rise. In the Bronze Age, bread rises if it rises at all thanks to wild fermentation. Sometimes you save a lump of yesterday's dough, alive with natural yeast, and mix it into today's batch. Sometimes you just leave the dough out in the open and hope the air blesses it with bubbles. Historians still argue how widespread leavened bread was in this era. Some say most villagers stuck to flat, unleavened rounds. Others suggest they mastered simple sourdough long before hipsters rediscovered it. Either way, you're about to bake something dense enough to double as a doorstop. When the dough's ready, you pat it into flat discs. Some you slap directly onto hot stones near the fire. Others you tuck into the communal oven, a domed clay structure big enough to serve several families. This oven is the village's social hub, as essential as the hearth. Everyone takes turns, sliding in their loaves, gossiping while they wait. The air outside buzzes with chatter, smoke, and the smell of baking bread that makes even the most stoic elders' mouth water. There's a hierarchy here too. Who gets the first hot loaf? Sometimes elders or respected leaders, sometimes children, because no one can resist a toddler chewing bread like it's the best thing in the world. And sometimes, it's whoever happens to be closest when the oven door swings open. You hover nervously, hoping today's your lucky day. And when you finally tear off a chunk, the crust burns your fingers, the inside is chewy and dense, and you can't help but grin through the grit of unsifted husks. Bread is comfort, bread is variety, bread is survival turned into something joyful, if only for a moment. A quirky tidbit here: archaeologists analyzing charred crumbs from Bronze Age ovens have found traces of unexpected ingredients, things like poppy seeds, barley, and even wild herbs. It suggests bread wasn't just plain filler. Sometimes it was flavored, spiced, even experimented with. In other words, yes, your ancestors were already messing around with ancient artisanal bread long before bakeries charged $12 for it. But bread wasn't only about eating. It carried symbolism too. Sharing a loaf could seal an agreement. Offering bread to guests was a mark of respect. And in some places, small bits were given to spirits or ancestors as tokens of gratitude. Breaking bread wasn't just a phrase, it was a lived ritual. And yet, bread wasn't without risks. With no preservatives, loaves could mold fast. Grain mixed with stray ergot fungus might even make people sick, hallucinate, or worse. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age communities recognized the danger of bad grain or just thought the gods were punishing them. Either way, when someone starts twitching after eating bread, it's not exactly comforting. Still, the reward outweighs the risk. You tear another piece, dip it into leftover porridge, or smear it with fresh curdled cheese. It's chewy, smoky, slightly sour, and utterly perfect in its imperfection. Around you, villagers laugh, talk, and chew together, the oven glowing at the center of their little world. Bread isn't just food, it's community, comfort, and the smell of life itself rising from clay and fire. You've probably heard the phrase, "all roads lead to Rome." And while that's true in a symbolic sense, the actual roads themselves weren't the luxurious, smooth stone highways you might imagine. Instead, most Roman roads were cobbled with large, uneven stones that rattled your bones if you walked or rode for too long. Horses slipped on them, carts broke down, and your feet blistered after only a few miles. There were no proper sidewalks outside major cities either, so you had to share the road with everything: marching soldiers, traders, wagons, droves of livestock, and even sewage trickling down the edges. You'd constantly dodge filth, beggars, and pickpockets waiting for the distracted. Travelers often carried a walking staff, not just for balance but also to ward off stray dogs, or worse. Highwaymen, inns along the roads called kopani, were infamous for their dirty beds, watered-down wine, and theft. If you were unlucky enough to stay overnight, you might wake up with fewer belongings than when you arrived. Wealthier Romans tried to avoid this by staying in private villas or military way stations, but ordinary people had little choice. A journey of just 20 miles could feel like a brutal expedition, leaving your body aching and your stomach turning from bad food. Yet despite the discomfort, these roads were lifelines. Soldiers could march rapidly, officials carried imperial orders across vast distances, and merchants brought in luxuries like silk and spices. Still, you wouldn't find many people strolling for pleasure. Travel was dangerous, exhausting, and slow, an endless reminder that even Rome's greatest engineering feats didn't make life much easier for the common person. The day continues, and you begin to realize how tightly controlled every part of your Roman life is. Taxes, for example, are unavoidable. The empire thrives on its system of taxation, and as a citizen, you are expected to contribute to the state treasury. The collectors come around regularly, demanding their share. If you are a farmer, they take grain from your harvest. If you are a craftsman, you pay in coin. Even if you are poor, you may be required to provide labor in public works. Complaining will not save you. Refusal might result in confiscation of your property or worse, imprisonment. Taxes are not the only financial burden. You may also be compelled to contribute to local festivals, repairs of roads or aqueducts, or the upkeep of temples. While these public works keep the city functioning, they also keep your pockets empty. You might envy the wealthy senators who have vast estates to draw income from, yet they too are often burdened with heavy expectations, such as sponsoring games for the public or building monuments in their name. Rich or poor, there is no escaping the financial weight of empire. Now, imagine you live in a provincial town. The taxes collected there are not just for local use. Most of them flow back to Rome. The empire demands tribute from its conquered territories, ensuring the capital and its elite thrive at the expense of the provinces. As an ordinary person in one of these regions, you may feel resentment. You might toil endlessly in fields only to see your grain shipped off to feed Romans hundreds of miles away. And if you try to resist, the empire's legions will remind you of the futility of defiance. The military presence is constant in your life. Soldiers march through the roads, their disciplined steps echoing authority. They protect you from barbarian raids, but they also ensure obedience. The sight of their armor and weapons is both reassuring and intimidating. If a rebellion stirs nearby, you know the punishment will be swift and brutal. Crucifixions may line the roads, a warning to anyone who dares challenge Roman order. The empire promises peace, but it is a peace maintained by fear. And still, beyond taxes and soldiers, the expectation of loyalty weighs heavy. To be Roman is to swear allegiance not just to the state, but to the emperor himself. His image appears on coins, his name is invoked in prayers, and his statues loom over public spaces. You may whisper doubts about his policies in private, but publicly you must show respect. Refusal to honor the emperor can be interpreted as treason, a crime punishable by death. Living under constant pressure to perform loyalty, you never feel entirely safe. As the afternoon light begins to fade, you are reminded of your own fragility within this colossal machine of empire. One mistake, missing a tax payment, offending the wrong official, failing to salute a soldier could unravel your life. The empire is mighty, but it leaves its people weary, always bending under its weight. Would you like me to continue into section 12, where I'll take you deeper into the struggles of Roman family life, marriage expectations, child rearing, and the crushing roles assigned by society? You sit at the table in a Roman triclinium, reclining on one elbow as a servant pours wine into your cup. It seems luxurious at first, but then you remember the whispers. Poison is everywhere in Rome. Senators fall ill after banquets, emperors suspect their wives, and slaves are forced to taste food before their masters dare to touch it. You lift the cup, but the sweet smell of spiced Falernian makes you hesitate. Is it safe? You cannot be sure. A companion beside you chuckles and warns, drink too much, and you won't wake tomorrow. But he isn't just joking about drunkenness. In the world of Roman politics, assassins used poisoned wine as casually as others used daggers. Even emperors like Claudius were said to have met their end by a tainted dish. Each sip feels like a gamble. You decide to drink slowly, but that does not spare you from danger. The wine is thick and strong, mixed with resonant herbs to preserve it. Romans rarely drank it pure, they diluted it with water. Sometimes honey, sometimes salt water. You swallow, but it burns your throat and leaves a sour aftertaste. By the end of the night, your head spins. You collapse into uneasy sleep, haunted by the thought that you may not wake at all. Tomorrow, you will face harsher fears. Not poison, but the arena. Would you last long enough to cheer, or would you be dragged in as entertainment? The morning begins with the sound of drums and the roar of a crowd. You are pushed along with thousands of Romans, all flooding into the Colosseum. The heat of the sun bakes the stone, and the air smells of sweat, oil, and roasting meat sold by vendors. You feel the weight of excitement and dread mixed together. Everyone around you is eager. You are not. You take a seat high in the stands, where the view is wide but distant. Below, the arena floor gleams white with sand that will soon be stained with blood. The first event seems harmless. Exotic animals paraded before the crowd. Giraffes from Africa, bears from the mountains, even a chained tiger that thrashes against its handlers. But soon the entertainment grows darker. A man is dragged into the arena with no armor, only a net and a trident. Across from him, a gladiator in bronze helmet and sword waits silently. The fight is uneven from the start. The net misses, the trident breaks, and the man is cut down to cheers and laughter. Your stomach knots. You try to look away, but the noise of the crowd pulls you back. This is what the Romans call munera, the games, but there is nothing playful about it. Criminals, slaves, and prisoners of war are forced to die for sport, while the citizens feast their eyes on suffering. The sand is raked smooth between each fight, but the stains never truly vanish. Then, someone nearby notices your pale face. He laughs, slapping your shoulder. First time. Hey, don't worry, you'll get used to it. His words chill you, because here, cruelty is not hidden, it is celebrated. You realize that in Rome, compassion is weakness, and weakness is dangerous. You stand, shaky on your feet, eager to leave the arena before the next match begins. But outside the walls, you find no comfort. Rome is waiting with harsher trials, endless taxes, military drafts, and the suspicion of every neighbor. The Roman roads beneath your sandals are smooth, but each step is a reminder that your own feet are not accustomed to such relentless pounding. Soldiers march them daily, their calluses thick, their discipline hardened by endless drills. You, however, lag behind, your breath shallow, the leather of your sandals biting into your skin. You are not cut out for such distances. Yet this is the lifeline of the empire, stone veins stretching thousands of miles, carrying goods, soldiers, messages, and orders. The grandeur of Rome depends on these lines, but for you, they are exhausting and merciless. As night falls, you cannot simply pitch a tent wherever you wish. Bandits stalk these roads, deserters who know the patrol routes, or desperate peasants turned thieves. You sleep uneasily in a roadside station, one of the many mansionnees meant to house travelers. The bed is rough, the straw infested with lice. You roll from side to side, scratching at your arms, wondering how anyone can endure night after night of this. A Roman officer, sharing the same quarters, laughs at your misery. You'll get used to it, he says. though you suspect you never will. Come morning, you join the queue of traders pushing carts, their donkeys braying and stumbling under loads of amphorae filled with oil, wine, and grain. The air stinks of sweat and mule dung, but there is no escape. This is the economic engine that feeds Rome, and it grinds on endlessly. Should you fall behind, no one waits. The road belongs not to the individual, but to the flow of empire. You learn quickly that compassion has little place in the Roman machine. Your journey takes you into the countryside, where fields stretch into the horizon. These are not free peasant farms, but vast latifundia, estates owned by senators and wealthy elites. Slaves bend double in the sun, cutting grain with scythes, their backs glistening with sweat. Overseers shout, whips crack, and the silence of compliance rules the air. You imagine yourself among them, laboring from dawn until dusk. No rights, no escape, no future beyond toil. It chills you to realize that most of Rome's food comes from this misery, and without it, the empire's marble temples and bustling markets would crumble. Further along, you see another face of Roman agriculture, sheep grazing, tended not by citizens but by captured foreigners, chained together at the ankles. Wool, meat, and hides enrich their masters, while their lives vanish into anonymity. Some whisper rebellion, but the fate of Spartacus looms large, a reminder of what happens when slaves rise. Rome tolerates no threat from below. You understand, watching them, that the system is built on their suffering, and to live as one of them is to exist without hope. The road eventually leads you to a town, smaller than Rome yet still alive with commerce. Its forum is filled with chatter, vendors hawking figs and olives, smiths hammering bronze into shape, beggars pleading for scraps. The smell of fish mingles with the metallic temps of blood from the butcher's store. You weave through the crowd, overwhelmed by the press of humanity. Everyone is hungry, everyone is hustling, everyone is caught in the churn of empire. If you thought Rome was harsh, here you learn that the provinces mirror its demands in miniature. Yet not even here can you find peace. The governor's men collect taxes relentlessly, squeezing the townspeople for tribute that will travel back to Rome. A family beside you protests, claiming their harvest failed and they cannot pay. The soldiers confiscate their tools anyway, leaving them with nothing but despair. You cannot intervene. To oppose Rome's tax machine is to invite a spear in your ribs. You slip away silently, shaken by the ruthlessness that sustains imperial wealth. That night, as you lie awake in the corner of a crowded inn, you realize the truth. Survival in Rome is not about grandeur, or victory, or even glory. It is about endurance, enduring the hunger, the roads, the taxes, the sweat of endless labor. You are soft in a world that demands hardness. The empire tolerates no weakness, and it grinds you down with the weight of its roads, fields, and markets. You close your eyes, but rest does not come easily. The sound of distant marching drifts through the window, soldiers passing on yet another patrol. Their footsteps are steady, measured, eternal, yours. By contrast, falter in that rhythm, the beat of Rome's survival. You hear the certainty of your own exhaustion. And so, you drift through this imagined day in the Roman Empire, bone-tired, blistered, and hollow with hunger. You discover the empire wasn't made of shining marble alone, but of sweat, dust, and aching feet. You weren't a senator in a clean toga, nor a general receiving cheers. You were the invisible body who held up their world. When evening falls, you have no candle, no parchment to write upon. Just a low roof above you, the chatter of neighbors squeezed into cramped space, and the knowledge that tomorrow repeats with little change. Your muscles will ache, your belly will protest, your dignity will shrink, and yet, like millions before you, you will rise with the dawn, because survival allows no pause. You might have dreamed of Rome as greatness carved into stone, but living it as one of the many forgotten souls is something else entirely. You wouldn't last a day yet. Countless others did, quietly, endlessly, building an empire not for themselves, but for those whose names survive in history. The marble is still here. The stones of roads and aqueducts endure, but the daily misery, the hunger, the sweat, the small lives sacrificed, those echo faintly only in the silence after the crowd has gone home. And as you close your eyes, you realize the Roman Empire wasn't just about emperors and battles. It was about people like Yordner, weary, enduring what history rarely remembers.